Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this series that is presented to you by LPT, and we are running IIM BMS course marathon. You have had some sessions as of now, and you have another session of verbal ability today. And in today's video, we are going to deal with reading comprehension. Right, guys, so for those of you who are targeting BMS on 22nd June, it's important to understand that RC is an important topic to prepare for VARC section, and today exactly we will be looking at how to solve these RCs. Although I understand that you already know about it, you might have practiced it in class as well, but today we will be solving some passages and we will be looking into the process of solving RCs, meanwhile also understanding the strategies to solve the RCs so that you can have accuracy in your reading comprehension. So let us get started, guys. For those of you who have joined me already, welcome, and let's just hope that more people join me so that we can continue the class. Guys, RC is all about comprehending and your reading skills. So when you talk about reading comprehension per se, there are two skills that is being checked. One is of course your reading skills, and the second one that is being checked is of course your comprehension. Now, because you have already done with the basics of RC, I'm sure that you understand there are two types of questions here. So you have factual questions and you have inference-based questions. And most of these examination, they give you both a mixed variety of these questions. So you have some factual questions plus you have some inference based questions. The essential difference between these two type of questions is that factual questions are direct by nature. So you have some specific information that is being given to you in the passage, and there are questions that is based on that. On the other hand, if you are solving inference based questions like the ones we will be solving today, you need to understand the main idea, you have to understand the tone of the passage, and there are some nitty gritty that you will be dealing with. So assuming that you already understand how RCs are solved and how do we go about arriving at the answers. So the important technique that we follow is of course the elimination process. So when you have 4 options, 3 wrong and 1 right, it's easier to spot a wrong option than it is to spot a right option. So we will be looking into all the theoretical understanding that we have of RCs, how do you put it into questions, and then how do you deal with it. Now also remember one thing, students, that when you talk about reading comprehension or any other question for that matter, the time taken to solve these questions is a crucial factor in your performance in the section, right? So when you talk about RCs, RC of let's say anywhere about 250 words to 450 words with let's say 4 to 6 questions, that is how the standard pattern basically is, should not take you more than 6 to 7 minutes, or maximum it can go up to 8 minutes, right? But then it's all about figuring out which questions you are doing and how you're channelizing your strategies there, so that it helps you to understand कि RC को भी solve करने का there is a time frame and you have to stick to that time frame so that you solve those questions and you solve it in the right time. So let's quickly get started with the session. We have the first passage. So we are dealing with reading comprehension. So let me give you the passage. So you have the passage here. Good afternoon, everyone who has joined me. Good afternoon. So we have the passage here. I'll give you a few minutes to just go through the passage, read it, understand it, and then we will go to the question. So let me just hand it over to you. Please start reading the passage. Guys, read through the passage. I'll scroll it in a while. Just read the first paragraph. Just read through the passage, guys, and we will quickly move on to the next slide. Complete the passage and then we'll go to the questions. Few more minutes to go before we start discussing the passage and solving the questions. Just read through the passage, guys, and then we will quickly move on to the next slide. So once we finish reading the passage, we can go to tackle the questions. Okay guys, so I hope that you have read this passage. Let's quickly move on to the next one before we start discussing what exactly this passage is all about and how you are supposed to deal with the passage and answer the questions. So this part is done. Let's move on to the next part here. Yeah, so you have it here. Please quickly read this. Okay guys, so I believe you have read the passage, and now see there is a sort of debate going on in terms of saying that when you deal with RC, should you read the passage first or should you go to the questions first. Now there are different line of thoughts here, and I think that by now you have already finalized whether you attempt an RC by looking at the questions first or is it the passage that you look at first. Both of these methods, so whether you have a look at the questions first and then you go to the passage, or you first go to the passage and then you go to the question, you have their own plus and minus, and I believe that at this point of time you would have already figured out कि जब आप RC को attempt करते हो तो आप उसको कैसे attempt करते हो, ठीक है. So you can do both ways. You can go to the passage first and then you go to the questions, or you have a quick look at the questions first and then you go to the passage. Now in terms of solving the RC, it is important for you to understand the essential details. So we will quickly go through the main points of the passage and then we will go in terms of what is the strategy to answer the questions. So let's deal with it. It says, since right, so it says, yeah, 1 second. So it says, since the worldwide inoculation process, so you have this word here which is inoculation, and you must be knowing by this time that inoculation is just another word for vaccination. So it says, since the worldwide inoculation process is going strong, vaccine diplomacy has become a hot topic. So basically this passage, or essentially this passage, deals with vaccine diplomacy. It says it has become a hot topic in their quest for ensuring vaccine security. A report by the New York Times based on the data on vaccine contracts compiled by Duke University shows that, so there is a research being quoted here, and it says that the advance purchase contracts made by some advanced countries for potential vaccines would vaccinate their population many times. So they have acquired vaccinations to the point that they can vaccinate their population many times. So it says what? The European Union 2 times, United States Kingdom 4 times, and Canada 6 times. So there is a vaccine diplomacy that is going on, right? The expectation that an early vaccination will bring back normalcy and a required push to the economic growth fueled many advanced countries to engage in vaccine battles. Okay, right. The arguments of public good and global cooperation have been gone out of the window now, while advanced countries, so here is a take of advanced countries have turned their back on the need of poor countries to access COVID-19 vaccines. India has displayed empathy to their needs. So with respect to the passage, we are saying that when it comes down to vaccine diplomacy, advanced nations have turned their back to the poorer nations, but it is India which has displayed certain sense of empathy to their needs. India has taken a position that a significant percentage of the approved doses will be permitted for export. So India is helping these poor countries acquire vaccines through exports, while its exports to neighboring countries will be under grant mode. Initial shipment of vaccines to least developed countries will be free of cost, right? So it is being employed free of cost here. Shipments of vaccine from India have already started reaching different parts of the developing world. While India is in its first phase of vaccination to cover healthcare workers, exports from India are helping other countries initiating phase of their vaccination, and that a gesture that is well appreciated. So the kind of stance taken by India towards these poorer nations in acquiring these vaccines is a gesture that has been well appreciated globally. Okay, then in a democracy, one can expect the backlash. So you talk about criticism that is being inherent there. So in a democracy, one can expect the backlash of sending vaccines abroad without vaccinating the population. Nevertheless, India's approach only reinforces the need of having coordinated global efforts. So we are saying that the stance that is taken by India is in lines with the fact that you are talking about coordinated global efforts in bringing COVID-19 under control. This response manifests India's unstinted commitment to global development and has consolidated its name as the world's pharmacy. So India has been labeled as world's pharmacy because it is taking a stance that in order to help these poor nations to have control of vaccines. Now, the attitude of India towards vaccinating the population in the poor countries has generated discussions in the richer countries about the necessity of more proactive measures to roll out vaccines to the developing nations. So essentially speaking, when you talk about this passage deals with vaccine diplomacy, and what it quotes as a research is that there are many nations who have acquired vaccines to the point that they can vaccinate their populations many times. Here is the stake of India, of course. So the developed nations have turned their back on the need of poor countries, but India is helping them acquire these vaccines simultaneously with vaccinating its population and then carrying on with the further. So it also talks about the fact that India has come up to be labeled as the world's pharmacy, as it is helping these poorer nations to acquire control of vaccines. So this is the thing that we are looking at, and we are also looking at a broader picture of global efforts and global cooperation in terms of dealing with these vaccines. So I hope that at least the passage is clear, and we can quickly go to the questions now. Let's have a look. And if you look at the passage here in terms of the tone as well, just remember guys, tones also help you big time in eliminating the choices. So when we solve the questions, it will help us to understand how to deal with these questions and how do you eliminate the choices. Let's look at the first question here. It says, which of the following best describes the purpose of this passage? So this is again a main idea question or the primary purpose question. Let's look at the options here. It says to encourage vaccine nationalism and discourage global cooperation. This is just the opposite of what the passage is saying or what the author is saying. So we are not encouraging vaccine nationalism. It is just opposite to that. And we are not discouraging global cooperation. So this is cancelled out. This is cancelled out. It is just the other way around, in fact. So we are discouraging vaccine nationalism, that is the attempt by the countries to acquire more and more vaccines that would vaccinate their populations many times. So you are discouraging vaccine nationalism and you're encouraging global cooperation. So this is fine and this is fine. Let's look at other options also before we finalize our answer. It says to encourage poor countries and discourage advanced countries. It's not about encouraging the poor countries and neither it is about discouraging the advanced countries for that matter. So this is cancelled out. To encourage India to provide vaccines to poor nations. India has been doing that without this passage here. So India has already been helping those poorer nations to roll out vaccines. So again, this does not make sense. So your answer choice is B. So it is about to discourage vaccine nationalism and to encourage global cooperation. That is what the author has an opinion about. And because we also mentioned in the passage that India is turning out to be or labeled as the world's pharmacy, as it is helping these nations to acquire vaccines, right? So I think that makes sense. Let's have a look at the next question now. First one is done. It says the term inoculation process as used in the passage means. Now guys, for those of you who know that inoculation is just another word for vaccination, let's look at the options here. So it says production and distribution of vaccines. Inoculation simply means vaccination. It's not about production and distribution of vaccines, so that is cancelled out. Global struggle for vaccines. Inoculation does not mean global struggle. Then pharmaceutical production of vaccines, it also does not mean to say pharmaceutical production. It simply means vaccination. So your answer is artificially inducing immunity, which is just describing what vaccination means. For those of you who don't know, just remember vaccination is also known by a complex term, which is inoculation process. Let's look at the third question now. Advanced purchase contracts of vaccine by developed countries are premised on the hopes that. So there was a line in the passage, I hope that you remember. So it says what? advance purchase contracts by vaccines by developed countries are premised on the hope that. Let's have a look at the options. It says vaccination will restore normalcy and thrust economic recovery. Well, when we were reading the first paragraph, there was a mention of it, and let us see if we can find a better option than this. We will go for that as an answer. Otherwise, this is very much close to what we are looking for. Second one says vaccination will bring back powers to nation. We have not talked about the fact that it would bring power back to the nation. So this point is not supported by the passage. Vaccination will promote global well-being and growth. This has not been emphasized. So when you talk about these advanced purchase contracts by developed countries, this is not what they are hoping. Actually, they are just making it sure that their population is being vaccinated many times. Okay, so when you say will promote global well-being and growth, actually the passage says that the entire case of good hope and all this good doing to the nations has been thrown out of the window. So this is just the contradictory part to what the passage is saying. So again, this will be eliminated. It says vaccination will protect the health of the world population. So this is again something that is not supported by the passage. If you go back to the passage, let's just look at this part, and it helps to put the things in perspective. So right, so here you have this answer which is being inferred from this line, will bring back normalcy and a required push to economic growth. So if you look at this information, of course you will be able to figure out that it's all about the first option that was talked about. So vaccination will restore normalcy and thrust economic recovery. That forms a right answer. Fine, I hope that is clear now. Let's quickly go to the fourth question. Guys, understand one thing, when you're solving an RC, it's very important for you to understand where you take your reference for your answers. So for every answer you solve, whether you are solving a factual question or you are solving a inference-based question, your answer has to be supported by the passage. You should have a clear idea from which paragraph and from which line you are deriving your answers. If it's a direct question, you have information that is being made. If it is an inference-based question, so you would not have the direct answers to the questions, but you can make that out on the basis of what is the primary point of the passage and what is the tone of the author in answering those questions. Okay, let's look at the fourth question now. It says the author cautions that India's approach in vaccine distribution may have negative repercussions among. So we said that in a democracy like India, there was a backlash. So India was not vaccinating its own population, but it was making it sure that these vaccines reach the poorer nations. So there was a case of backlash coming up. So it was a criticism from its own population. So if you look at this way, it says people from advanced countries, well, that's not the idea here, because we were talking about criticism in terms of people from India. So this is cancelled out. It says from poor countries, again not supported by the passage. People from developing countries, even that is not the claim. So it says cautions that India's approach in vaccine distribution. So India's approach in the vaccine distribution was that it did not vaccinate its own population completely, but it was ready to make it sure that the poorer nations receive the vaccines. So even that is not supported. So if you look at this option here, the answer would be people from India. So the stance that is taken by India in helping the poorer nations gain these vaccines may invite some sort of backlash from the people from India. So that forms a right answer. Right? Let's look at the next question now. Okay, so it says among sustainable development goals, the third goal reads ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. So this is the SDG goal that is being stated by the author. It says which of the following sentences from the passage reflects the reversal of SDG. So you have sustainable development goals and it says ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. You have to choose an option that is the reversal of these SDG. Let's have a look at the options. It says the arguments of public good and global cooperation have gone out of the window. So Of course, this is against the idea of SDG that is stated by the author. Okay. B says advanced countries have turned their back on the need of poor countries to access COVID-19 vaccines. Even this statement does not support the fact that ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Of course, this could be the point. And then you have the advanced purchase contracts made by some advanced countries for potential vaccines would vaccinate their population many times. So if you go back to the passage here, let's just quickly look into it. Right, so it says the arguments of public good and global cooperation have gone out of the window now. So it is referring to the fact that nobody is caring about the fact of public good and global cooperation. So if you look at this way and you look at the options here, okay, so when you say the advanced purchase contracts made by some advanced countries for potential vaccines would vaccinate their population many times, even this option is contrary to what the SDG says. So here we are talking about ensuring healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. All of these three options A, B, C is the reversal of the SDG. So the answer would be D option, which is all of the above. Okay. I hope that makes it clear. So basically what we are doing is we are eliminating the options on the basis of logic before we arrive at a right answer. Right? I hope this makes sense. Let us go to the next passage now. Let's start reading the next passage, guys, before we start solving the question. Quickly go through the passage. You have a remaining part that is in the next slide, and then we will deal out with the questions. Alright guys, so hoping that you are done with the first half of the passage here. Just quickly read it through. Alright guys, here is the next part. Just let me know through the chat box if you are done reading the passage, and so that we can quickly discuss the main points of the passage and we can start solving the questions. Alright guys, so I hope that you have read the passage. Let us quickly discuss the main points of the passage before we go to the questions. So it says what? It says following the transition of democracy with the inauguration of Nelson Mandela as president in 1994, South Africa was faced with the task of dealing with its past, as well as undertaking some action to deal with the structural social injustice. So we are talking about South Africa here, and we're also talking about the task of dealing with its past as well as undertaking some action to deal with the structural social injustice, right? Now what this actually means, it says the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, heralded as the most ambitious and organized attempt to deal with the crimes of a past regime through a concept of truth, came into force on 19 July in South Africa. So we are talking about the commission here. Now, emerging as a political strategy to acknowledge past suffering while promoting a future based on concerns of social justice, the Rule of Law and Reconciliation Commission has struggled. So when you talk about the TRC, that is Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it has struggled to fulfill its objectives. So it had certain objectives in mind, but it has struggled to fulfill those objectives. Now, although the TRC incorporated these broader concerns, so previous to that we were discussing some broader concerns here, into the mandate of its 3 subcommittees, they were disregarded in practice. So it did not really fulfill the promises that it made. So it was not able to address these broader concerns that it had. So it has disregarded in practice. These subcommittees which reflected concerns of human rights violations. So you talk about human rights violations here. Amnesty and reparation and rehabilitation were not coupled. So it was not coupled with some form of social transformation. The public transition from apartheid established through a negotiated settlement rather than a revolutionary process framed the commission's powers. Then towards its end it says, shaped by the historical context of this particular transition, the TRC was careful not to rock the structural boat. So it did not fulfill the objectives that it was looking into. It did not actually regard those concepts in practice. Let's look at the next part here. Now, rather than pursuing truth and justice as an integrated feature of social transmission, the Commission and to a greater extent of South Africa maintained an agenda that avoided a challenge to the status quo. So we are saying that it avoided the challenges to the status quo here. Now, a focus on restorative justice was taken by the Commission with an emphasis placed on mechanism to restore victims and survivors through reparation policy, state-led acknowledgement of suffering and a condemnation together with transformation of the system that implemented such widespread form of abuse. So if you look at how this passage is drafted, it is going towards the negative side, a slightly negative tone in terms of how the passage is written here. The priority of changing the apartheid condition of gross inequality and oppression. So you have also mentioned gross inequality and oppression provided a backdrop to the approval of TRC by those who had suffered. More difficult to accept was the provisions of amnesty to those who had undertaken violation of human rights. So there was a gross violation of human rights. The process placed amnesty of violation as a carrot to perpetrators in exchange for a full story, with the stick of prosecutions for those who did not come forward. So if you look at what are the contents of this passage, is basically about TRC and how TRC has failed in implementing these broader concerns, and it has, in doing so, it has actually violated the human rights concerns as well. Let's look at the questions now. First question, it says the status quo as used in the passage means. So let me see if you can answer this question. What is the meaning of the term status quo? So a direct question here. Any answers, guys? It says previously popular opinions, already existing conditions, strategies of government and following a set agenda. Now, for those of you who know the term status quo, I'm sure you would not have any problem in answering the question. So, it's not about popular opinion. So, this is cancelled out. Status quo means the existing conditions. So, when you say already existing condition, this is the correct answer because it's a direct question. So, the answer would be pretty much straightforward. Strategies of government, that's not the meaning of status quo. Status quo just means the existing conditions or the present conditions. Following a set agenda, even that is not the meaning of status quo. So this was pretty direct in nature. Yes, Devesh, correct answer. So we just wanted to know what is the meaning of the status quo. Now guys, understand such type of questions can be answered without going back to the passage. ठीक है, तो अगर आपको उस expression का meaning पता है and you know its term by itself, you just have to eliminate your options and come up with the right answer. Let's look at the next question. Which of the following best describes the tone of the author? I told you in the beginning that when you are reading a passage, it's always important to figure out three things. You should be very clear about what the passage is talking about. The subject matter or the topic of discussion should be very much known to you. Second thing, we look at the main idea of the passage. So the first passage that we did had a main idea to it. The second passage that we did was of course on a similar reason, right? And let's look at tone of the third thing of course that you look into, of course the main idea is that you look at the tone. So tone questions are very much prominent. You may have a question here. So if you look at which one describes the tone of the author, now you have a neutral kind of a topic discussion here, but the way the passage has been written, it is talking about the failure of the TMC in actually fulfilling the broader concerns and the approvals of all these topics here. And then if you look at these options here, it's not optimistic because the tone is slightly on a negative side. So optimistic, which is hopeful, does not make sense because the way the passage has been written and the idea of the passage that TMC has failed to fulfill its promises that is being there, it's not threatening because the passage is not on that negative way. Compassionate, of course, if compassionate is when you feel concern for somebody's problem, and that is not how the author has written the passage. The answer is critical because it is criticizing the way the TMC has handled the situations and it has done gross violation with respect to human rights violation. Yes, correct guys. So the answer is critical. Let's go to the next question now. Which of the following is not the broader concern of Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC? Yes, so it's a factual question. Let me know if you want to go back to the passage, have a look at the options and try to come up with an answer. Which of the following is not the broader concern of Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Let me know if you want to go back to the passage. Just have a look at this part. Right. Just go through the passage once again. Yes, here you have the question. Read through the options and let me know the correct answer from your side. Correct. So if you look at the options, guys, so I just hope that you have read through the broader concerns wala area here. So there was a part here, right? So here is the reference point. So look at this part. Emerging as a political strategy to acknowledge past suffering while promoting a future based on the concerns of social justice, the rule of law and reconciliation, the commission has struggled to fulfill its objective. Plus, it has also talked about attempt to deal with the crimes of a past regime through the concept of truth. So this is the reference point that we were looking at. Your answer would come from here. Okay, so this is the reference point here. Let us see what the options are saying. So to deal with the crimes of past regime through a concept of truth, this has been stated in the passage. This cannot be the answer. Then the second one says to acknowledge past suffering. Even this has been stated. So this cannot be the answer because we are answering about which is not the broader concern. Then it says to emerge as a political strategy for reconciliation of rule of law to promote a future based on the concerns of social justice. This has been stated by the passage. So this cannot be the answer choice. The answer is option number C, to emerge as a political strategy for reconciliation of rule of law. Yes, correct, Devesh. Very good. Let's look at the next question now. Which of the following statements is least likely to be inferred from the passage? So read out the four options and choose an answer which is least likely to be inferred from the passage. Okay, guys. If you want to go back to the passage, let's look at this part now. Yeah. Here is the rest of the passage. Okay, so let's go to the question now and see to this. Now it says which of the following statements is least likely to be inferred from the passage. So we are saying that we are looking for an option that is least likely to be inferred. Let's look at the first one. It says that TRC ignored some of the broad concerns. In the beginning of the passage, the author has clearly stated that the TRC ignored the broader concerns that it was looking for. So this has been inferred, or this can be inferred from the passage. So this cannot be the answer because it can be understood from the passage here. Then the second one says the subcommittees of TRC lacked an agenda of social transformation. If you look at the first half of the paragraphs and the RC here, it has been talked about that it lacked an agenda of social transformation. So even this can be inferred from the passage in terms of the details of the passage here. Then C says that TRC made earnest efforts to protect human rights. If you have read the passage clearly, you would understand that the TRC is actually criticized because it has violated these human rights grossly. So this is the least likely thing because made earnest efforts to protect the human rights. And D says the TRC lacked the desire and strength to challenge the prevailing conditions. So remember that line which talks about the status quo. This has been again inferred from the passage here. So this comes from the status quo wala information that we are dealing in the passage. The answer to this question is C, which is the TRC made earnest efforts to protect human rights. It was just the other way around. So the answer choice is C option that we were looking for. So this is least likely to be inferred from the passage. Now next question, what does amnesty mean in the context of the passage? This is a direct question, guys. If you know the term amnesty, you will quickly have an answer. They are asking you mean in the context of the passage. So is it severe punishment, bring legal action, arrest warrants, or official pardon? Any answers, guys? For example, if you look at these options, amnesty has been used in the passage somewhere over here. Right, so you have this term here which is amnesty. Just make an attempt if you can make sense out of the statement for those of you who don't know what amnesty means. That's the last question we are solving. Yes, Devesh, any answers? Okay, so it says what? More difficult to accept was the provision of amnesty to those who had undertaken violation of human rights. So we are talking about granting amnesty to people who had responsible for violation of human rights. If you look at the options, right, so it is not severe punishment, it is not bring legal action, it is not arrest warrant. The answer is official pardon. Amnesty is a formal word for official pardon, right, guys? Okay, so this was the RC session that we had planned. So I'm sure that you understand how RCs are to be solved. Just remember one thing, guys, no matter whether you are solving a factual question or you are solving an inference-based question, the answer has to come exclusively from the passage. So you should know where your references lie, and you should also know what is the information that is being supported by the passage, what is not being supported by the passage. And also remember one thing, that when you are answering the questions of RC, you use the process of elimination over selection. Okay, that was it from my side. We will continue with more such sessions, so please join us, right? That is it from my side. Goodbye, take care, and see you there.